Hello and welcome to the Argyle HR Technology Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, SHRM. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would also like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we truly appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Monty Williams, founder at ALU. We're excited to have Monty with us for his opening keynote titled Harnessing Hyper-Personalization to Improve Employee Experiences. Welcome, Monty, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is improving the employee experience. There's a plethora of different ways to improve the employee experience. And I believe that hyper-personalization is truly the key. I think when you talk about hyper-personalization, there is a factor to it that I believe we as HR professionals and we as leaders can lean deeper into, and it is human connectedness. So during our session, I hope to share an experience with you that helped me understand the value of human connectedness, but also help transform an organization through human connectedness. I look forward to all questions. Please be interactive in the chat, ask as many questions as necessary, and I will do my absolute best to answer everything as we go through it. So let's get started. When I remember my first consulting gig, and it was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the company that hired me was interested in transforming their culture, but they couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong with it. All they knew was that they had a low level of employee engagement, and that was causing low productivity. It was impacting their bottom line. And my job was to come in and identify what was wrong and recommend a plan of action. Now, for context, the company was about 150, 200 people. And over the first month, I spoke to over 75% of the organization across various different departments, sales, ops, finance, you name it. As I entered the second month, I had a good grasp of what was going on and why the company was experiencing such low engagement and productivity. And now it was time to report my findings to the exec team, which can be intimidating at times, especially with the news that I was going to share. So I walk into this boardroom. Let me set the stage for you. I walk into this boardroom, and it's about 15, 20 chairs in there, and there's about 7 or 8 individuals there. As I walk into the boardroom, I noticed that there's a gentleman there that I had never seen before. And he seemed to be very preoccupied. So though he was preoccupied with his phone, ironically, he was the first person to speak. And without looking up, without saying hello or introducing himself, he said, "So you're the person we hired to fix this. How bad is it? And do you know what the problem is? And my response was, hi, my name is Monty. What's your name? He then said, look, I don't have time for meaningless small talk. Do you know what the problem is or not? And can you fix it? I looked at him, took a deep breath and said, yes, I do know what the problem is. And then in a kind of a snarky tone, he said, what is it? So I waited a moment and I said, respectfully, the problem is that you and many of your leaders in the organization don't believe in quote unquote meaningless small talk. And as a result, your employees feel like they're just that, employees. So then he looks at me and he says, well, what's the problem with employees feeling like employees? That's what they are, right? And I looked back at him and I said, well, I mean, they are employees, but they're humans first, employees second. And the problem is that by making them feel like just employees, you're ignoring the human element. And it is impossible to maximize the potential of an employee if you don't maximize what it is to be human within that employee first. And the room was dead silent at that point. I broke the silence by saying, if you want to fix your problem, you must improve the employee experience. But the way to improve the employee experience is to personalize it. But here's the thing, you can't personalize the employee experience without being human. So the real question is, how badly do you want to fix it? And, you know, there's something about vulnerability. I always say that vulnerability begets vulnerability. And when I asked him how badly did he want to fix it, he took his glasses off, kind of did this, and he took a deep, remorseful sigh and he said, it's my company. Of course I want to fix it, but I don't know how. And now you're telling me that being human can help us personalize this experience, but that doesn't make sense to me either. And I said, no worries, this is why I'm here. And I explained to him this concept. And I said, listen, business relationships and personal relationships operate on the same principles. What yields success in one yields success in the other because people drive both. So if you want to improve the employee experience, being human to the people that drive all relationships is the way to do it. And there's and when you talk about improving the employee experience, you have to get to know the people. That's how you personalize it. And there's a 3-step process to personalization. And I'm going to take you through what I took him through. The first step, improve human connectedness. This first step is to actively seek to improve the level of human connectedness between you and your teammates, your leaders, your employees, however you term them. And before we go any further, I want to make sure that we're all clear on what human connectedness is. So, what is human connectedness? It's when an individual is actively engaged with another person, activity, or object or environment, resulting in a sense of well-being. Human connectedness creates a level of security, psychological safety when we feel connected. This means that we have to give ourselves permission to genuinely create relationships as humans first, not just employer to employee or leader to employee. It's a human relationship first. The way we develop these relationships is to get to know one another. And by asking meaningful questions that give us insight into what someone is thinking and what someone is feeling. The process allows us to understand where we are aligned, where we're misaligned, where the gaps are, and it gives us an opportunity to collaborate to bridge those gaps. And then I introduced him to a team building exercise. I introduced him to a team building exercise that could help kickstart this process. And the acronym for it is called PUG, and PUG stands for Personal User Guide. And this is something that you can do with your teams. I do it with all of my teams. It's an excellent reset point. And I'm going to take everybody through the process and kind of what it looks like. Okay, so the Personal User Guide. What the Personal User Guide is it's a team building exercise where you give you and your team a list of questions, and everybody has to fill out all of these questions. And then after they fill out the questions, after they answer the questions, then they take everybody through all of their answers. So what are these questions about, you may be thinking? So it's a series of various different things, and I'll take you through what each of them are and what the questions are. First and foremost, it is, what is the person's value system? What values are important to you? So this is the place where when you ask somebody about their value system, one, they may have never thought about it before. So, and if they haven't, now you're pushing them to critically think about it in a particular way. But two, if they have thought about it, now they're being open enough to say, here's my belief system, here's what I value, here's what I don't value. And when you know what a person values, it enables you to meet them where they are and communicate with them in their language. Next, communication style. How do you like people to communicate with you? Sometimes the communication style is, I'd like people to talk to me via email. Sometimes they only want to talk via telephone. Sometimes people like to do it, one-on-one in person. Everybody has different communication styles because we're all different people. But when you understand how people like to be communicated with, it gives you the opportunity to be that much more effective when you're communicating. Next, decision-making. How do you make decisions? When you ask somebody about how they make decisions, it gives you insight into their thought process. This question is especially important when the leader answers it. So if I answer this question for my team and I give them insight into how I make the decisions, now they can factor all of that in when they come to me with a request or when they come to me with an ask. Next, support and boundaries. So support, how do you like to be supported? Everybody likes support in different ways. Sometimes the support is, sometimes the people just need an extra couple minutes in the middle of a day to take a moment, to take a breather. Sometimes the support is they need to have a conversation about their personal lives. Sometimes the support is they need additional training, or they need somebody to hold a safe space for them in order to be able to be as effective as they need to be. Whatever support is needed, it gives you the opportunity to understand how to support your team and how your team can support you. Boundaries. The question here is, what will you not tolerate in others? I always have fun answering this question because I really have like one boundary, and it's don't be rude. I do not tolerate rudeness. And ironically, this is another important question for the leaders when they answer it specifically, because when you outline to your team what you will not tolerate, you're setting the boundary and the baseline from the very beginning. Next, recognition. Asking somebody their preferred method of recognition. Everybody doesn't like to be called out for a great job in front of everybody. Sometimes people just want a simple thank you. Sometimes their preferred method of recognition is money or gifts or classes or trips, who knows? But when you understand what the preferred method of recognition is for your team, you have a greater opportunity to help them to feel valued more consistently. Next, authenticity. This is a big one. When do you feel you're your most authentic? This question is important because one of the things that we all desire when we're in the workplace is we want to be able to feel like we can bring our best selves to work. But what does that really look like in practice? What does it look, what do you need and what does your team need in order to feel like they can be their most authentic self at work? Because many of the strokes of genius, innovation, and changes in the world come from people being their most authentic selves and then allowing their genius to come from that. So this is a very important question, very important question. And last, but certainly not least, life philosophy. What is your life philosophy? What modus operandum do you live by? Is it a quote? Is it something that a parent or a loved one told you? What is your life philosophy? When you are able to go through these questions as a team, and then each one of you explain this. It should take about 10 or 15 minutes for each person to go through everything. And then you open the floor up for questions in case anybody doesn't understand something. But when you are able to explain these things to your teammates and to your colleagues, if you decide to do an interpersonal, interdepartmental team building exercise, it changes how you interact because now you have more information. And in essence, this personalizes the employee experience. Next step to personalization. Optimize one-on-one meetings. Oh boy, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. I love one-on-one meetings. So one-on-one meetings presents a very unique opportunity for leaders to connect with their teammates on a human level because it's just us. The reason why this is important is because without the psychological safety of human connectedness and the interaction, it's difficult for us as leaders to understand what really matters to our teammates and how to support them. So here are some things to think about when you're gauging the level of human connectedness that you have with your team. Frequency. How often are you conducting one-on-ones with your team members? Is it once a week? Is it once a month? Is it once a quarter? What is that frequency for you? Well-being. When you're in your one-on-ones, do you talk about their well-being as a person? Do you ask them about how they are, how their families are, what they got going on, what their dreams, aspirations, things like that? Or are you just talking about work and did you get the job done? Interest and fulfillment. Do you discuss what interests them about their current role? What excites them? What fulfills them? What makes them happy within the confines of their role? It's really important to ask this question because, especially during your one-on-ones, because when you ask this question, you get to understand, are your teammates working just for the check? Or is this a stepping stone so that they can get to a different place in their career in this field? Because that changes their level of engagement and how they do their job. Career goals. Do you know what your team wants to accomplish for themselves? both short-term and long-term. And I would gently push you to ask these questions proactively, because it lets your teammates know that you care about them. And it also puts you in a position where they may be hearing these questions for the very first time. And maybe they've never thought about them. And now you're the catalyst for that. Next, challenges. Do you create a space for them to let you know where they're struggling so you can aid them in developing in that area? This is an interesting one, because has a lot to do with vulnerability, psychological safety, and many teammates feel as though they can't tell their leader when they're struggling or what their challenges are, because they fear that by saying it is going to deem them incapable of doing the job, or that there's going to be judgment from their leader. So how are we as leaders creating a space to really understand the challenges that our teammates are facing? And feedback. Do you extend an olive branch for your team to give you feedback for how you can be better for them? And this is a tough one, because to proactively ask for feedback about you week in and week out, and when you have teammates and you have your one-on-one, it can be challenging, because sometimes you may not want to hear the feedback. But the fact of the matter is that when you have the courage to ask your teammates about feedback about you, it helps improve their experience, and it also helps to make you a better leader. Now, I wanted to make sure that there was a gauge here. So the questions on the previous page, you can break them down into like an audit, and those are audit questions, but you can break them down into a scale. And if you answer every one of those questions, and I put an example here so you understand the concept. So it's how often do you conduct one-on-ones with the members of your team? If never, it's a 0. If seldom, it's a 1. If sometimes it's 2, often is a 3, and always is a 4. If you take this model and you do it for all 6 questions, and you answer, and you're honest and you answer them, it can give you a sense of whether you need to improve your level of human connectedness with your teammates, or whether it's already strong. From my analysis, anything greater than 18 means that you have a strong level of human connectedness with your team members. Anything that's 17 or below means that there's a weak level of human connectedness, and there's an area of opportunity to improve that. This is something that when I lead senior leaders and directors, and sometimes VPs, I ask them to go through this audit process with me, so that we can pinpoint if they're actually connected with their leaders and with the people on their team. And if they are, great. And ironically, if the more connected the leader is with their team and with the individuals on their team, usually the greater the performance. And if they're not connected, then we explore why the connection isn't as strong and how to improve it. Then the last step to personalization is solicit feedback directly. And this is the final step in improving the employee experience through personalization. Ask for feedback directly. Now, you can do this on a micro level, you can do this on a macro level. So often do we as leaders take the approach of no news is good news. But when you're dealing with teammates, which are the company's most important asset, that is a risky approach. The reason it's risky is because without extending the olive branch repeatedly, not just one meeting, but repeatedly until the teammate actually feels like you genuinely want the feedback, they may suffer in silence from fear of being viewed as a complainer or from fear of being viewed as somebody that cannot do the job. I remember there was an experience where it took me about 7 weeks for me to ask this question consistently with one of my leaders until they said, you know, you ask me about feedback for you every week and I never say anything, but do you really want the answer? And I said, of course, that's why I'm asking. And then they kind of went through this whole idea of, well, you're not going to judge me and you're not going to fire me. And it's like, no, I genuinely want to know how I can be better for you. And in doing that, that was the turning point in our relationship because they finally believed that I really wanted the feedback and they were open to it and they were open to giving it. So when you talk about the different levels of feedback, the caveat to this is, first and foremost, you should always be ready and capable of handling the responses. Meaning, it doesn't mean that you should always want to listen to it, but you should always listen with an open mind and be able to look for the truth in it, right? So, different levels of feedback. First, on a micro level, one-on-one meetings. The best way to handle this on a micro level is definitely through one-on-ones. In every one-on-one, ask this question: what do you need more of or less of from me as your leader? Asking this question proactively creates a space for the teammate to give you feedback without fear of being judged. It may take a couple times, but eventually, if you ask it consistently, eventually the fear will fade because you're asking and you're consistent with it. It's important that when you ask for the feedback that you're willing to hear what's being said and that you're looking for the truth in it. Regardless of whether they answer it or not, always ask. Here's a quick note to this. You don't just have to, you can also proactively ask this question to your leader. It doesn't just have to be to your teammates. You can ask it to your leader as well when you're in your one-on-ones. And you'll find that if you ask it consistently, it will eliminate anything, it will eliminate the possibility of well, you didn't do this right or you didn't do that right coming up only during a performance review, because you've asked it consistently. The second way, on a macro level, employee surveys. Now, the key to employee surveys is to make sure that they are anonymous. Why anonymity? Because anonymity creates psychological safety. For companies that are courageous enough to implement this, anonymous surveys are the most effective way to solicit feedback. The reason for this is because the level of psychological safety it creates, it promotes vulnerable transparency from your teammates about what really matters to them and what's really going on within the organization. And let's face it, we're not trying to change the employee experience for us, we're trying to change it for the greater good. So, will there be isolated incidences of complaints? Of course, right? That's always going to happen. But the key here is that when you analyze the data, the trends will guide you on the areas of the employee experience that matter most to the teammates, and that will let you know where the organization needs to focus, because so to say, the team has spoken, and then you can prioritize things accordingly. So I took the gentleman at the organization through this. And after I took him through it, through these steps, he and the team agreed to keep me on for about another 6 months. And over the next 6 months, we slowly transformed the organization using this exact methodology um, into an employee-first, hyper-engaged, forward-moving company that valued human connectedness and feedback as a means to personalize the human experience. So just a couple takeaways. One, first and foremost, accept that employees are humans first, then employees. When you accept the human piece of it, it allows you to connect on that human level. Recognize the value of human connectedness, hugely important. Create psychological safety. The greater the psychological safety in the organization, the higher the probability that you will understand what's really going on, what the real challenges are, and what really matters to the teammates in the organization. Understand your teammates as individuals. This is the personal user guide. I highly recommend implementing that as a team building exercise. Optimize your one-on-one meetings. Conduct the human connectedness audit. See where you score, and then look to improve in the areas that your scores are lower. And ask for direct feedback. If you're doing it on a micro level, the question is in your one-on-ones, what do you need more of or less of from me as your leader? If you're doing it at a macro level, anonymous surveys in order to create psychological safety and eliminate the fear of retaliation. Again, I took the organization through all of these, and inside of 6 months, we were able to transform it, and their bottom line was increased by year end by about 22%. It was an awesome experience, and I've used this framework ever since. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Monty, for such an insightful keynote presentation. We did have a few questions come through, but unfortunately we are at time, so I will be happy to share any and all questions with you. But thank you again for such an excellent keynote. I also want to thank everyone who joined us for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you so much again, Monty.
Thank you so much for having me.